All right, awesome. Thanks for waiting. Good morning. So as she said, I started this thing. So this is pretty awesome being back here for me on stage. When I got this thing started, I didn't imagine that it would last more than 2 years, much less 5 at this point. So it's an awesome testament to the team that's continued it on. And when I was thinking about this talk, I kind of realized that for me, things had kind of come full circle. I started this while I was an undergrad. Now I'm back here on stage as a founder with a new startup that I'm going to talk a little bit about. But to a lot of people who met me after Startup Bootcamp, it seemed obvious that I was going to be a startup founder or do something with startups after graduating. But even just a few years ago, I was actually the least likely person to do a startup. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, is sort of my journey from where I came from to where I am now and where I'm going in the future. I feel a lot like this photograph right now. So to start at the beginning, let's rewind the tape. So I grew up in Oregon, which when I came to MIT, this is actually what most people knew about Oregon, the game Oregon Trail. And most of my classmates were pretty disappointed that I didn't spend my days hunting buffalo or fording my oxen across the river had I died of dysentery. And it's funny, Oregon actually doesn't look that different than this. It looks like this. So there's some truth in it. But besides being an outdoorsman's playground, Oregon is pretty empty. To give you a sense, the state is massive, but the population is about the same as the Boston area. So a small town in Oregon is like really small. So while most of my future college peers were taking AP classes or doing biomedical research at these crazy places, instead my passion was photography. I was the kid carrying around the camera. I also had kind of long, shaggy hair. Everywhere I went, I brought my camera. It was kind of my canvas to create in the world. Sometimes I was in the right place at the right time. And I learned to tell stories through images. It got me out of my bubble. Normally I wouldn't have even gone to watch football, but I was able to shoot these award-winning photographs of games. And photography was also kind of this way that I could create a visual essay. It let me express ideas or opinions that I had. It also taught me to look at the world a lot differently and show people that. It rains a lot in Oregon, so it's pretty wet. So I guess what I suppose I'm trying to say is that before I came to MIT, even when I was at MIT, I was probably the furthest from a startup founder. I was that geeky creative kid in high school. I wasn't the prodigy programmer. I'd originally planned to go to school for go to school for music or journalism even. That's an actual quote from someone at my high school, one of my advisors. So somehow I got in. I'm not going to go into that because I have no idea how it happened. But I met this guy when I visited, Alex Hornstein, who showed me 3 things. And if you're around MIT, you probably know them. MITRES is a student-run machine shop. It was one of the first hacker spaces. TEP is a fraternity across the river that Alex was actually the president of. It's not really a typical fraternity. It's kind of a mix between Animal House and a mad scientist lab in one. One of the rush events is exploding pickles with high voltage capacitors. So it's not exactly beer chugging. And the Media Lab, which is this amazing fusion of art, design, and technology and music. And immediately I fell in love. These were maker havens. I'd always learned best by making things. I didn't have the background, but I figured, what the heck, I'll try it out. And this guy convinced me to move to Cambridge. So I got to MIT and was absolutely, completely lost. I didn't fit in anywhere. I ended up changing my major 4 times. I was giving my academic advisor even more gray hair. He didn't know what to do with me. And the reality was, this is kind of why I came here. I just wanted to be this person that made things and thought about the world. Turns out you can't major in MITRES. You have to actually get a real major. And I wasn't that excited about classwork. I wasn't convinced grad school was going to be that much better. And I kind of started getting worried. All my peers are getting jobs or figuring out their careers. I needed to figure something out for after graduation. So about the same time, I'd read some stuff online about Silicon Valley. I knew this guy, Kyle, who had dropped out to do a startup. He seemed like a cool guy who was making stuff and liked it, so I figured I should learn more. Problem was, I couldn't find anyone at MIT to talk with about startups. Now, this seems kind of crazy now because we're in this like massive wave and everyone and their mom is doing a startup. But at that time, you know, it wasn't the same thing. You know, I didn't want to take the approach of commercializing research, being in grad school and taking that later. And I was kind of too punk rock for the Sloan guys. So when I asked my advisors, my friends, my professors, nobody had a good answer. And since I'd always learned by making things, I figured, like, why not a conference? So Startup Bootcamp. That was the genesis of it. I was frustrated. I wanted to talk with people about startups. I figured these names that I wanted to hang out with, I couldn't get them to just come have lunch with me by flying across the country. But maybe if I invited them to speak, they would come out. And it worked. Long story short. This was spring of 2009. I'd never run an event before. The first event, we had over 1,000 people come. I got about 15 grand from VCs and lawyers. It was a lot of fun. We did 3 things incredibly right in hindsight. The first was we got amazing speakers. The second was we told a lot of people about it. And the third is we got a lot of coffee. That actually ended up being really important for the morning. And to get speakers, people ask me later, how did you get these amazing names to come? And it's really simple. It's a really simple recipe. You email their first name at thebillionDollarCompany.com. Jeff Bezos is literally Jeff at Amazon.com. Eric Schmidt, Eric at Google.com. Elon Musk, Elon at Tesla Motors. You see. And although those 3 guys couldn't make it out, we did get some really awesome people to sign up. So then the other question was, how do we get people to come to this? And about the same time, I was trying to figure out how do I communicate this idea of what I think the startups are. I mean, all companies were startups. You know, anything that had gotten started had been started by 1 or 2 people at one point. So we started making these logos and had kind of fun with a marketing campaign. And we got a little too into it. It turns out every company was a startup at one point. So the event happened. It was awesome. It was amazing. I was actually so stressed and sleep deprived, not unlike right now, that I don't remember much of the first event. It kind of just was a wipe from my brain. I had to go back and watch the videos later, so I kind of failed at my initial goal. But the effect it had on my life after was pretty apparent. I kind of felt like this. Somehow, I tried to stay out of the limelight, but overnight I became this face of startups at MIT. VCs emailed me wanting to do coffee, which was kind of strange because I had always drank coffee. I didn't know like what to do with it. So it had less to do about drinking the coffee and more about sourcing deals. And it seemed really exciting at first. They offered me these associate positions and flew me to conferences. But in the end, it was kind of awful. I had to wear these like polyester slacks and dress up. And I kind of woke up one day and I was just like, what's going on? I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but this totally wasn't it. So I didn't become a VC. I created a club to run Startup Bootcamp from then on. I wasn't going to be an event organizer forever. And I got back to doing the things that I really cared about. And this, turns out, was an incredibly important decision. This was by far one of the most important things I did. So I don't know if I can really give you advice, but here are the three things that I did. The first was I had a lot of ideas. And for me, this meant every few weeks I would fill up notebooks with random stuff I'd been thinking about. You know, things that are wrong with the world, things that seem strange, things I wanted to learn or things I wanted to make, things I wish existed. Just a lot of observation. And I think this trained my mind to be really observant of detail. It doesn't really come naturally to anyone, turns out. Having ideas takes practice, and to be a founder, you need to be able to see things other people can't. Also, most of your ideas will be crap. Mine definitely were, trust me. So don't let that discourage you. If you're coming up with crappy ideas, you know, you're doing it right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I read everything I could, way outside my major if I even had one. Stuff from business to product design to blogs online to HBS case studies I would find, listening to NPR, reading papers, literally everything I could. I considered this kind of getting my MBA or getting a well-rounded education. I had almost gone to a liberal arts school, so this was kind of the way I got that education. The truth is, if you only know how people at MIT behave, you'll only build products for people like those at MIT. And the awesome thing about MIT is it's different than the rest of the world. So you kind of got to learn how everything else operates. You got to build an intuition for how the rest of the world works. So in the end, my overdue library finds and my 4 broken Kindles were probably the best investment dollar-wise I made while I was here. So the first, have a lot of ideas. The second, read everything you can. The third one is the most important. And I kind of stumbled into this without realizing it, but it's been incredibly important. And that is to develop skills. So the thing is, if you get an engineering degree, you're not really an engineer. You become an engineer by engineering things. You have to build things. And as a school, MIT doesn't teach you to build enough stuff to get out of school and start building it immediately. This is why people go get job experience or you do internships. Building products is way, way different than solving problems on P sets, it turns out. There's no office hours. If you don't deliver, you get fired. You always have to work with teams. It's always collaborative. You know, if you think about it, you get out of school, every single project you do from that day forward, you'll have to work with other people on it. You're never evaluated on individual work again. So for me, I hadn't written a single line of code before I came to MIT. Spring of my freshman year, I started writing code. And this is how I became a software engineer. These are some of the companies and logos of projects I worked on. So if you don't know how to code, I really encourage you to learn and try it. Some people do this with open source software or UROPs. I really liked getting paid. It was great. I got paid about 10 times as much as a UROP does here. And I was doing real world experience. I was working with actual companies instead of grad students. There's also something magic about being able to make things. You don't have to ask for permission or go convince people. Code is this amazing thing that wins arguments and silences your critics. It's one of the most empowering things I've ever experienced. So those are the 3 things. Have a lot of ideas, read everything you can, learn to build stuff. Even if you don't do a startup, this is a pretty good recipe, I think. There's a caveat to this. It takes a lot of time. You know, there's no substitute for hours. It's a constant process. This is in a sign that's actually in the locker room of the San Francisco Giants baseball team. And it shows what happens if you improve 1% every day. It's pretty dramatic. And then, of course, the Picasso quote. Inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. So this isn't easy. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about what I did after school. I actually managed to graduate. I moved to San Francisco. So now I'd like to give you a peek of what I've been working on since then. So I haven't showed this to anyone yet. So this is exciting and just a little nerve-wracking. But the origin of this came from a thought I had while working at Dropbox, which was, would I rather lose all of my email or all the files in my Dropbox? What was more important? What would I rather lose? Both were tools I used every day. Both had about the same amount of data, 10, 12 gigabytes, something like that. And so I started thinking more about email. This is while I was writing my thesis. And I realized it's the thing that everyone uses. Everyone hates it. It has these massive technical challenges. It's this meta problem. We use it for file sharing, our identity online, notifications, newsletters, bank statements, flight confirmations, on and on and on. And Gmail sucks. That's the best thing we have. Like, if you think about it, Gmail is really slow, and they filter out spam just to show you their own spam in the form of ads. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. So it seemed right. Had the right ingredients for a startup. Big market, a lot of hard technology. It was a pain point for me, and we had this crufty foe we were going up against. So I started this process, and here's kind of how it went. So this is Picasso again. These are a series of drawings he did for the famous drawing, The Bull. This is in a museum in Chicago. And you can see how he moves from this very initial idea and adds a bunch of detail as he goes along, every single minutia. And then he starts to take things away. And it becomes more abstract. And he ruthlessly extracts the essence of what makes the bull. And only at the end is he able to draw the bull. And it only takes a few lines. So we've been trying to do this with email. And the first step of what we have, we're calling Inbox. So this is a new web-based app. Works with your existing account, so you don't have to get a new email address. We're thinking about it like the Tesla-like email, in terms of focusing on speed and performance. And it's for people that are power users, people that really need their email to be fast. So not really casual users, people like doing sales, biz dev, project management, people that communicate a lot. So this is a little scary, but to give a demo, right? You like to see a demo? All right. So to help me do this, I'd like to invite my co-founder, Christine Spang, to come join me.
Hey everybody, I don't have a mic, so I can shout.
Let's see if this works. Oh, here we go.
Wow, these people are magic.
Give it up to the AV team.
Yeah.
Can you steer and look at that one?
Probably.
OK.
I got skills.
So this will be a little strange because it's squeezed in a smaller monitor, but we can make it work. So we've focused on a handful of things with Inbox. We've stripped it down. And the main thing we're trying to do, first of all, is make it really, really fast. This just looks like email. It's something you're used to. It's not some crazy new tool. But the number one thing we found when talking to people is they're trying to retrieve information really quickly. And that's really slow in Gmail. Search is really slow. So we've spent a lot of time building a search feature. And this is pretty quick to demo, actually, because it's fast. But go ahead, and it searches as you type.
Yeah, so here we go. So first thing, we'll just take a look at a couple of Michael's private email messages.
Sorry, this is, oh, great.
Yeah. You found the right co-founder when he lets you read their private email for testing.
So there's an incredible amount of complexity here in the back end in terms of working with email. Email was actually invented before the internet, before TCP/IP. So it kind of has the most legacy baggage you could ever imagine. In order to make the search really fast, we actually download all of your mail to our servers, and we index it, and then we keep it in memory, which is something Gmail can't do.
All right, so we do a search as you type for all your mail, and we're going to show you that right now. Does this mic go on? Oh yeah, that is on too.
All right.
Perfect. Then I don't have to hold it. All right, so what if, so I wonder what was new on Medium this week. Let's take a look. Or maybe what was new on Medium every week. And then we can scroll.
Usually you're using this on a display that doesn't have the same number of pixels as like 1992.
Yeah, the aspect ratio is pretty weird.
Sorry about that.
I'm a little slow at this. I don't use Macs. I use Linux for everything. Also, I'm not usually trying to look at a projector and type on a different screen. So, oh, man, you went on that awesome sailing trip.
Yeah.
With your dad.
Hopefully she doesn't go search for ex-girlfriends or something.
Oh, God. Man, the angle is terrible for me over
sorry,
here.
I'm blocking.
I mean, it doesn't actually help if you move.
Yeah, there you go. So that's the flight, or the confirmation for seeing the race. All right, so let's jump to the next thing. So we've focused a ton on performance. That's really important for email, obviously. The second thing that we like to demo today is something that no other client has done before. And this came from something I've been thinking about for a long time. A lot of people talk about email being your to-do lists. You know, you star things, it's where you come back to figure out what you have to do that day. But actually, it's mostly because that data is trapped in your email. You can't get it out. People have tons of to-do list apps. Email is only a to-do list because that's where the data enters. So we built a way for data to leave your inbox. So if you see this archive button on the corner, there's a little arrow that points down. And if you click on that, yeah, let's go find another.
Let's find some other mail.
Oh, we might have broke it.
Oh, no.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah, I also just can't see. Can I spell?
Let me see. Sorry, I broke some of this stuff last night. I told you it might be a little bit rough.
Yeah, where's your journal?
Yeah, there we go. So this is the email I got from Taylor about the hackathon that was happening yesterday. And actually, I probably want to take this and put it on my Asana. Asana is an app that I use for to-do list tracking. It's collaborative, so you can share it with people or other friends or coworkers. So if you click that arrow that goes down, you see it?
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, not the archive. Uh-oh.
Oh, no. We can find a different
Try that one, the one for Renee.
Oh, this one.
Yeah, the Loku one.
Can't upright max. Is that it?
Yeah. So you can send this to Asana, or if you're doing sales, you can send it to Salesforce. So this is also pretty simple to demo,
Man.
but we think the possibility for this, taking your inbox and being able to connect it to a bunch of services, is pretty awesome. And you can imagine being able to add this to Dropbox, to kind of any application that you want to build. So I think we'll stop demoing now for that. You can come chat later, and we'll show you some more stuff, but it's pretty cool. Cool. Thanks.
Good.
Let's switch back to the slides. So I've talked about a lot of stuff today. I talked about where I've come from, talked about what led me to being here, some things I've learned along the way, and also, finally, where I'm going, what I'm working on. So it felt like it's come full circle for me, being here again. But realistically, I think I actually feel like that, right about there. If there even is a circle, you know. I said this is how I felt when I stepped on stage. But speaking here somehow today has sort of been, it's felt like the first step towards something else, towards something totally new. And for me, this is a process that's just as terrifying as it is exciting. And I've kind of realized the only way that I can do it is to make it up as I go along. You know, by definition, in order to make something that doesn't exist, you need to do something that nobody has ever done before. So there's no right way to do it, and there's nobody to ask. So unfortunately, I think this feeling of unease and unpredictability is probably not going to go away. But what I know for certain is that somehow, through this process, I kind of won the jackpot. I'm having a ton of fun. I love what I'm working on. And I'm working with awesome people. And because of that, I'm totally up for whatever comes next. Thanks a lot. Do we have time for questions? Maybe a couple? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for coming back and speaking at the event, by the way. I wanted to ask so like your email platform, I saw like under the archive button, has like integration with Salesforce. So like, were you thinking of like turning this into like a CRM platform like in the future? Because you said it's for a lot of power users, like tracking sales and stuff like that, so.
Yeah. So the way I've been thinking about it is we want to be an input to a specially designed tool. So people use email for tons and tons of different stuff and have these really complicated, specific workflows on top of it. So we want to build a way that we can get data from your email into that application really quickly. So as you're doing triage, you send it to Salesforce or some other app. And that application has built a tool specific to that use case. So whether it's Salesforce or to-do list tracking or bug tracking or what have you, that application can handle that behavior.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for coming and giving us really great lecture.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. So I'm pretty much like a very non-technical person. I'm studying sociology and business in my college, but I want to work at a startup or get involved with startup. And I'm kind of learning to code. And you emphasize the importance of coding and programming.
Yeah.
But I mean, the more the better, but I can't devote all of my time for learning coding, right? So how far or how much should I go to coding, and what can I expect from learning coding for a startup?
So I think a lot of people don't realize there's a range of writing software, and they really only see the extreme side of it, where it's people working at like Google and building these huge systems or something. And that can't be your target when you start going. There's this great story about there's an American climbing Everest with Sherpas, and before even base camp, the American, he's been training for years, and he's exhausted, and he collapses. And these Sherpas are like, these 60-year-old guys. And he looks at one of them, and he says, how can you do this? Like, I'm in peak physical condition, I'm 30-something, how can I do this? And the Sherpa says, well, when you're climbing, you look at the summit. When we're climbing, we look at our next step. And that's, I think, sort of how you have to think about this. Don't think about becoming the, top coder winner or something like that. Like, start off just building stuff, writing a few scripts. I mean, Inbox started off as one Python script, one Python file, and it's grown into this bigger thing. So I think a lot of people are intimidated to take the first step because they're scared that they can't make the long-term vision. But even learning a little bit has this like dramatic, profound effect on how you look at the world.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike. So one of the biggest problems that I've seen, and you mentioned briefly in your speech, was you're doing these things which people aren't doing around you, and you're getting crap from advisors, parents, friends, family, everybody. And
I'm still getting crap, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the strategies that you rely on, or how do you manage that?
Good question. I was kind of hell to raise for my parents because I kind of disregarded authority or what other people said to do. And that might have made me a bit of a problem child as a kid, but it's kind of been important to trust my own gut going forward on this stuff. I know that's not a good answer, but I think you have to build your internal compass. If you do what other people expect, you'll get expected results. And that's probably the biggest challenge of starting a company, is finding that internal compass. And like I said at the end, it's not, like even now, I'm not exactly sure this is the right direction that I'm going. Like since the first day I started working on this, it's always been unclear. But that is the thing you have to cope with as a founder. That's what you have to deal with. So like everything, like building stuff, like reading books, you just got to start getting practice at kind of being your own leader and pushing yourself forward in that way. Sorry, I don't have a good answer. I totally wish it was easier.
Yeah, seriously.
It's not.
Thank you.
Yep.
What language, platform, stack are you guys using, and has it been a problem or difficult finding
Great question.
developers?
I love tech questions. So I love Python. I've written a bunch of stuff in a bunch of languages. This is using Python with a Flask front end and a custom backend framework. It's really fast. The reason why it's fast is we're using WebSockets, which is a new HTML5 technology. The UI is built with AngularJS with a custom RPC solution to the WebSocket requests. Data stored in MySQL and encrypted on S3 in the backend. We're using AWS for a lot of stuff. It's really cheap. Using Amazon Web Services means you don't have to pay for what you're not using. So if we need a really big server for an afternoon, that'll cost like $3, $5 or something like that, and we can just turn it off afterward. Yeah.
Anything like Hadoop? Are you planning on using any of that for big data storage since you're storing all of the data up?
We've looked at it. Working at Dropbox, I learned a lot of stuff about building large systems with a lot of data. Hadoop is really good for some stuff. For some other stuff, if you try to cram it into the workflow, it just doesn't work. So, but Search is doing kind of a Hadoop-style MapReduce where we send it out to a bunch of servers and get results back. We parallelize it.
In finding developers.
Sorry?
In finding developers, that was my second question. Has that been easy, difficult, or?
Oh, hiring is another question entirely. That's really hard. Yeah, it's very difficult.
Okay. All right.
It's good to find really great engineers.
Exactly. Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
All right, let's do one more.
Oh, great. My name's Mary Jo Savino. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
It's been really engaging and exciting to hear you talk, and that was even before the demo. A side note, I just lived in Idaho for 3 years, so your introduction was kind of special.
Great.
But my question speaks to, I think only maybe half the audience will be able to relate to this now, but I think you'll all relate to it eventually. It's about social circle tension. So when we go through school and we're all on the same path and you develop these friendships, and then as you start to go out on your own with startups, some friends are risk averse and some are risk tolerant. And have you had to deal with the tension and pullback from people around you who are risk averse, trying to tell you, are you crazy? What are you doing? Don't do that.
Yeah.
And how do you, eventually I think those friends fall away, which is a cost that no one really talks about.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
you mentioned two groups. There's the risk averse and the risk tolerant. I've been trying to seek out people that are like risk seeking, which may be a little hazardous to my health. I don't know. But in general, I think those people, if this is a path you go down, they fade away from your life because it's hard to empathize. It's hard to connect with them. Going to school, even at a place like MIT, actually, most people here are pretty risk averse. You're at like probably the best university, certainly the best technical university in the entire world. You could work anywhere. You could get contract jobs and work less than part-time and more than pay your living. And yet, when people graduate, they feel this immense pressure to immediately get a job or immediately fall into the corporate machine or start climbing the ladder or find the next carrot that's hanging in front of them. When previously that might have been the grades or the accolades or their parents' approval. And to me, that's the bigger thing to overcome, is to start to put yourself in an environment around people that also don't know what they're doing, but they're supportive of each other. And it's not talked about very much, but that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to move to San Francisco. SF kind of has this culture of, it's a little crazy at times, but it's a lot of young people that don't know what they're doing, that have big ideas, and are just trying to make it work. And when you're surrounded by people with that kind of optimism and the work ethic that goes with it, you kind of become one of them. It's been said you're the average of your 5 closest friends. So find those friends, find who you want to become, and surround yourself with those people. And then you'll do awesome things. Thanks. All right, thanks a lot for having me. I'll be around too if you want to chat later. So thanks.